cold air inside the alien ship carried the smell of metal and smoke. Dim red lights flashed along the walls, warning of damage, but the young alien girl barely noticed them. Her heart was pounding too fast, her hands shaking as she pressed herself against the wall. She had been taught since childhood that if humans ever boarded your vessel, you would not live to see another sunrise. She believed every word of it. Heavy boots echoed down the corridor, not the light, quick steps of her own people, but a deep and steady rhythm. Human footsteps. Her breathing turned sharp and shallow. Every thud came closer like a hammer, hitting her chest. Then she saw him. A tall human man stepped into view, wearing dark armor scratched from battles. His face was partly hidden under a helmet, but his eyes were visible, sharp, scanning, and unreadable. He stopped when he saw her, and for a moment neither moved. She expected him to raise a weapon, but he didn't. "Identify yourself." His voice was deep, calm, carried no emotion. She froze. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. The stories said humans enjoyed the fear of their prey. She was not going to give him that pleasure. She stood straight, even as her legs trembled. 2 more humans appeared behind him. They carried strange rifles that hummed softly. The tall one lifted his hand and spoke a command in their language. She could not understand the words, but the tone was not mocking, it was an order. The soldiers lowered their weapons slightly, though they kept watching her closely. The tall human stepped forward. She wanted to run, but where? The ship was already under their control. His shadow fell over her as he stopped just a step away. He looked her up and down, not with hunger or cruelty, but like a man checking if something was broken. "You're coming with us," he said. Her heart dropped. She expected chains, pain, and darkness. Instead, one of the soldiers gently guided her forward. Not rough, but firm enough that she had no choice. They led her through the corridors of her own ship, now silent except for the sound of human voices over radios. She saw her people lying on the floor, alive, but stunned, hands bound. Humans were efficient, moving through the ship like they had done this 100 times. When they reached the airlock, the tall human turned to her. His eyes met hers, and for the first time, she noticed something strange. No hatred. It was like he was studying her, searching for something he could not find. On the human ship, the air smelled different, warmer, heavier. The floor under. Her feet vibrated faintly with the hum of powerful engines. Humans moved around quickly, each knowing their task. She expected them to throw her into a cage, but instead they took her down a narrow hallway until they reached a small room. Inside was a bed against the wall, a table, a chair, and a plate of food on the table. The door closed behind her. With a soft click, locking automatically, she stood still, confused. This was not how the stories went. She had imagined chains hanging from the ceiling, not blankets folded neatly on a bed. She had imagined the smell of fear and blood, not fresh bread and water. Still, she did not trust it. She sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the food. Poison, she thought. Or maybe something that would make her too weak to fight back. Stomach ached from hunger, but she would not touch it. Hours passed. No one came. The lights in the room dimmed slightly, telling her night had come, or at least the ship's version of night. She lay on the bed, still tense, listening for footsteps. Finally, the door opened. It was him again, the tall human captain. He stepped inside, his helmet off now, revealing short dark hair and a scar across his cheek. His eyes scanned the untouched plate, then moved to her. "You didn't eat," he said. His voice was still calm, but there was something in it now, a quiet warning. Or maybe concern. She stayed silent. He sighed, stepped forward and replaced the plate with a fresh one. Steam rose from the food. He set it down carefully, like he was handling something fragile. "Eat, or you'll get weaker," he said, then turned to leave. The door closed behind him. She stared at the new plate. Her mind was more tangled than before. If he wanted her dead, he could have killed her already. Why bring her here? Why feed her? Why speak without shouting or threats? The stories had not prepared her for this. The worst part was, she wasn't sure if that made her feel safer or more afraid. She lay awake that night, unable to close her eyes. Somewhere on this ship was a human captain who had spared her life, and she had no idea why. The hum of the engines was steady, almost calming, but she could not relax. She sat on the bed, knees pulled up to her chest, watching the door like it might burst open any second. Every sound in the hallway made her tense. Morning or what? The ship's clock called morning arrived with a soft chime and brighter lights. The plate of food from last night still sat untouched on the table, cold now. Hunger was clawing at her stomach, but fear was stronger. She told herself she could last without eating, that she would not lower her guard. The door opened without warning. The tall human captain stepped inside, carrying another tray. His dark eyes moved from her face to the old plate, then back again. He did not look angry, but there was a weight in his gaze, like he was measuring her stubbornness. "You didn't eat," he said quietly. She stared at him. Saying nothing without another word, he picked up the old plate and set down the new one. Fresh steam curled into the air, carrying the smell of cooked grain and something savory. It made her mouth water, but she forced her face to stay cold. He left just as quickly. The door ceiling shut again. For hours, she stared at the food. She thought of poison, of traps, of mind tricks humans might use. Yet the scent kept breaking through her thoughts. Finally, she walked to the table, picked up a piece, and sniffed it. Nothing unusual, just food. She took the smallest bite, ready to spit it out if anything felt wrong. But it was warm and good. She swallowed before she could stop herself. By the time the plate was empty, she felt both relieved and uneasy. If she kept eating his food, would she start to depend on it? On him. Later, the door opened again. She stood quickly, expecting soldiers or chains, but it was the captain once more. This time he was holding folded clothes. Simple, clean fabric, clearly her size. "Change into these," he said. "Your clothes are torn." She took them without a word. He stayed at the door, giving her space. That small act, not turning, his back, but not staring either, confused her even more. When he left, she changed. The clothes were soft, warmer than what she had been wearing. She hated that they felt comfortable. Hours later, the door opened for the third time. Now he carried nothing, only stood there, studying her for a moment. "Follow me," he said. She hesitated, but 2 soldiers appeared behind him. Their weapons were lowered, but their presence was a silent push forward. She stepped out of the room for the first time since being brought aboard. The hallway was narrow, lined with gray panels and flickering lights. The humans they passed gave her curious looks, but no one stopped her. They walked until they reached a larger space, a common area. Tables, chairs, a wall display showing a map of the ship's route. A few crew members sat eating or talking, their voices low. The captain led her to an empty table and placed another plate of food in front of her. This time she did not wait. She picked up the fork and began eating, ignoring the stares from nearby humans. When she finished, he sat across. "From her, you are safe here," he said. "But you need to listen and stay in your room, unless I tell you otherwise." She narrowed her eyes. "Safe. Why?" Her voice was sharp, carrying all the suspicion she still felt. His answer was simple. "Because I don't harm those I rescue." Word rescue hit her like a wave. She almost laughed. Rescue was not what this felt like. But his face was calm, unreadable, and she could not see any sign of a lie. When they returned to her room, she lay on the bed and stared at the ceiling. Her thoughts twisted into knots. She had prepared herself for the worst pain, humiliation, slavery. Instead, she had a bed, food, and clothes. She was locked in, yes, but not treated like an animal, and that made it harder, because now she didn't know what game he was playing, or if it was a game at all. That night, she dreamed of home. But the image of the human captain standing in her doorway kept breaking into the dream. He had looked at her like someone carrying a heavy burden, not like a predator. She woke with her heart pounding, unsure if the fear she felt now was really fear or something else entirely. The next morning, the alien girl woke to the sound of footsteps outside her door. She sat up quickly, heart tight in her chest. The lock clicked, and the human captain stepped in. As usual, he was carrying food, warm and fresh, the smell filling the small room. He set the plate down and glanced at her. "Eat," he said, and turned to leave. She watched him go, her mind already turning with a plan. She wanted to know the truth about him. She needed to test him. She needed to see what would happen if she refused him again, not because of fear, but because she wanted to watch his reaction. When the door shut, she picked up the plate and carried it to the hallway. She placed it right outside her door and stepped back into the room. If he was truly kind, he would simply take it away. If he was hiding something darker, he might show it now. She waited. Minutes passed. Then the door opened again. The captain looked down at the untouched food, then up at her. His expression did not change. He picked up the plate without a word and walked away. That was not the reaction she expected. She thought he would be angry, maybe threaten her. Instead, his silence unsettled her more than any shouting could have. Later that day, the door opened. Again, he stepped inside with another plate, different food this time. "Fresh," he said simply, setting it on the table. Her voice came out before she could stop it. "Why?" He paused at the door. "Because you're hungry," he replied, then left. She stared at the food for a long time. She could not find the trap in his words, but that didn't mean it wasn't there. She ate anyway, telling herself. It was only because she needed her strength. Days passed like this. Came in, gave her food, and left. Sometimes he asked if she needed anything else, but he never pressed when she shook her head. His calm behavior made her restless. No human she had heard of acted this way toward an alien prisoner. On the fourth day, she decided to push further. When he arrived, she stood in front of the door, blocking his way. "If you wanted me dead, you could have done it already," she said. "So what do you want?" His eyes held hers for a moment before he answered, "I want you alive." Pulse jumped at the honesty in his tone, but it only deepened her confusion. "Alive for what?" "You'll know when it matters," he said, stepping around her with the ease of someone who had dealt with stubborn people before. After he left, she paced the small room. She could not tell if he was hiding a secret or if the truth was exactly what he said. Both possibilities felt dangerous. That evening, the alarm lights flashed across the ceiling, deep red, spinning shadows over the walls. The sound of sirens filled the air, followed by the thud of boots running through the hallway. She rushed to the door, pressing her ear against it. The lock clicked, and suddenly he was there, wearing his armor. A rifle slung over his shoulder. "Stay here. Do not open this door for anyone," he said. His voice sharp but not unkind. Before she could respond, he was gone, the door sealing again. She stood frozen, torn between fear for herself and an unfamiliar worry for him. Had no reason to care about a human, yet the thought of him not coming back sent a cold shiver through her. Minutes felt like hours. The ship rocked under heavy impacts, and muffled shouts carried through the walls. Somewhere far away, metal tore with a screech. She curled into the corner, wishing she had never been brought here, yet also wishing the human captain would. Return finally, the sirens stopped. The vibration of the engine steadied. She sat on the floor, knees hugged to her chest, listening for footsteps. The door opened. He stepped inside, armor scratched, dust on his face, and a thin line of blood across his forehead. His eyes swept over her quickly, and only then did he relax. "You're fine," he said, more to himself than to her. She swallowed hard. "What happened?" "Pirates," he replied, setting his rifle against the wall. "They're gone now." She noticed his left hand was trembling slightly, and without thinking, she stepped forward. "You're hurt," she said. He shrugged. "It's nothing." Her mind screamed at her to stay silent, to keep her distance, but the words came out anyway. "You came back." He looked at her, something unreadable in his gaze. "Said you'd be safe here." That night, lying on the bed, she stared at the ceiling again, but this time, the image of him standing in the doorway was different. The man who had captured her had also risked his life to protect her. For the first time, she wondered if maybe she had been wrong about what kind of human he really was. The ship's corridors were quieter than usual, but the alien girl could sense a heaviness in the air. People walked faster, their faces tight, their voices low. Something was wrong. She sat on her bed, staring at the door, waiting for the captain's usual visit, but it didn't come. Then the alarm hit. A sharp, piercing sound filled the room, so loud it made her heart race. Red warning lights spun across the ceiling, throwing quick flashes over the walls. She jumped to her feet, her mind racing with questions. Was it another pirate attack? Were her people coming to rescue her? Or had something worse found them? The lock on the door clicked, and the captain appeared, fully armored, a large weapon. Slung across his back, his visor was lifted, revealing eyes that burned with focus. "Stay in here," he ordered. His voice was steady, but faster than usual. "Don't open this door for anyone but me." Before she could reply, he was gone, the door ceiling shut again. She ran to it and pressed her ear against the metal, hearing the chaos outside. Heavy. Boots pounded the floor. Orders were shouted. Somewhere far away, the muffled thud of weapons firing echoed through the ship's hull. She backed away, pressing herself against the wall. The fear she had felt when he first captured her was nothing compared to the dread now, because this time she was afraid for him too. Minutes passed, like hours. The floor shook under her feet, the lights flickered, and a deep groan of stress. Metal rolled through the walls. She clutched her hands together, wishing she could see what was happening, wishing she could know if he was still alive. A loud crash came from somewhere down the hall, followed by shouts in a language she didn't know. She held her breath, listening. The sound of combat drew closer, then faded, then came back again. It felt like the ship was caught in a storm of noise and violence. Her mind began to spiral. If he didn't return, what would happen to her? Would another human take over? One who didn't care if she lived or died? Would the attackers see her as a prize to be taken? The thought made her stomach twist. Suddenly, the door opened. She gasped, stepping back. But it was him. His armor was dented, his hair damp with sweat, and a thin line of blood traced down his cheek. He scanned her quickly, his gaze sharp, until he saw she was unharmed. "You're safe," he said, his voice low, almost like he was talking to himself. She stared at him. "What happened?" "Boarders," he replied. "They tried to take the ship. They failed." She noticed the way his left arm hung stiffly at his side.
"You're injured,"
she said. "It's nothing." His tone was final, but she could see the strain in his face. He crossed the room and set a small metal case on the table. "You need to stay in this room until I say otherwise?" "We might not be clear yet." She looked at the case. "What is that?" "Emergency supplies," he said. "Food, water, a cum device. If something happens and I can't reach you, use it." Her throat tightened. "You think you might not come back?" His eyes met hers. "I'll come back." For a moment the noise of the ship seemed to fade. She didn't know why, but she believed him. He turned to leave, then paused at the door. "Lock it behind me," he said, and stepped out into the hall. She did as he asked, then sat on the bed with the metal case beside her. Her mind was a storm, fear, confusion, and something else she couldn't name. She thought of the first, the time she had seen him, the cold look in his eyes, the way she had braced for pain. As she found herself watching the door, not to escape, but to see him walk back through it. Time dragged out. Every noise outside made her flinch. She held the cum device in her hand, though she didn't even know what she would say if she used it. She didn't want to call anyone else, only him. When the door finally opened again, he was there. Tired, dusty, but alive. Relief washed over her before she could stop it. "All clear," he said, setting his weapon aside. "You can rest." Now, she looked at him, wanting to ask 100 questions, but finding none of them would leave her lips. All she managed was, "You came back." He gave the smallest nod. "I said you'd be safe here." That night, she lay awake, replaying his words over and over. She had been prepared for cruelty, for chains, for a slow end. But each time danger struck, the human captain had been there, not as her jailer, but as her shield, and that terrified her more than anything. The ship felt calmer after the attack, but but the alien girl could sense tension lingering in the air. Crew members moved quickly, their voices low, their eyes scanning every shadow. She stayed in her room, sitting on the bed with her back against the wall, trying to convince herself she was safe. The captain hadn't visited since last night. That unsettled her more than she wanted to admit. Every few minutes she found herself glancing at the door, half expecting it to open. When the sound came, it wasn't the quiet click of the lock. It was a violent explosion that shook the walls, followed by blaring alarms. The lights flashed red again, sirens pitch high enough to make her ears ache. She ran to the door and pressed her ear against it. Shouts echoed through the hallway, mixed with the pounding of boots. This wasn't like the last attack. The voices were closer, and they were not all human. Suddenly the lock hissed, and the door slid open. But it wasn't the captain, too. Masked figures stepped inside, their armor painted in jagged stripes, their weapons pointed directly at her. "Move." One of them barked in a language she only partly understood. Her body froze. Every instinct told her to run, but there was nowhere to go. They grabbed her arms and dragged her into the hall. The air outside was thick with smoke, sharp scent of burnt metal clawing at her throat. She tried to pull free, but one of them shoved her forward. They moved quickly through the corridor, heading toward the docking bay. Her heart pounded. She knew what this meant. Whoever they were, they planned to take her. And once she was gone from the human ship, she would never see the captain again. They were halfway to the bay when the sound of gunfire erupted ahead. Bright flashes lit up the smoke, followed by the thud of bodies hitting the floor. One of her captors pushed her behind him, raising his weapon, but a shadow burst from the haze. It was him, the captain. He moved like a storm, striking the armed man in front of her with a force that sent him crashing against the wall. The second one spun toward him, but the captain's rifle was already raised. A single blast knocked the weapon from the attacker's hands, and a swift kick sent him sprawling to the ground. He grabbed her arm firm, but not rough, and pulled her toward cover. "Move," he said, his voice steady even in the chaos. They ran through the smoke-filled corridor, his body always between her and the danger. Twice more armed figures appeared, but the captain's aim was unshakable. Each time he fired only when necessary, wasting no movement by the time they reached the safety of the inner deck. Her legs were shaking. He led her back into her room, slammed the door shut, and locked it from the inside. She turned to him, breathless. "They were taking me," she said, her voice trembling. "I know," he replied, checking the lock again. His armor was scorched. In places, a dark smear of blood across one side. "Not all of it his. You could have let them," she whispered. His head snapped toward her. "I don't let people take what I'm responsible for," he said sharply. Something in his voice silenced her. It wasn't anger directed at her, but a deep, unshakable resolve. He stepped closer, his eyes scanning her for injuries. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head. "No." He exhaled slowly, and for a moment, the tension in his shoulders eased. Then he placed his rifle against the wall and removed his helmet. His hair was damp with sweat, his scar catching the dim light. "They'll try again," he said, "but they won't get you." She wanted to ask why he cared so much, why he had risked his life for her twice, but the words caught in her throat. Instead, she found herself saying, "You came for me." His gaze softened, just slightly. "I told you, you're safe here." When he left the room, locking the door behind him, she sat on the bed and stared. At the place where he had been standing, her heart was still racing, but it wasn't only from fear. For the first time since her capture, she began to wonder if she had been wrong about what it meant to be in human hands. The alien girl barely slept that night. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the masked figures dragging her through the smoke. And then she saw him, the captain, bursting through the haze to pull her back. Her mind kept circling one question she couldn't shake. Why? Morning came with the soft chime of the ship's clock, but the room still felt heavy. She sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the locked door. Usually he came by with food, but today the minutes stretched into hours. The silence pressed down on her chest. Finally, the door opened. The captain stepped inside, holding a tray, but there was something different in his eyes. His usual unreadable calm was still there, but beneath it a flicker of decision, like he had made up his mind about something. He set the food down and didn't step away. "Eat," he said, his tone steady. She looked at the plate but didn't touch it. "Not until you tell me why." His brow furrowed slightly. "Why? What? Why?" "You keep protecting me," she said, her voice sharper than she intended. "Why you didn't let them take me? Why you haven't treated me like a prisoner since the day you brought me here?" He stood there for a moment, his gaze fixed on hers. Then he took a slow breath. "You were never my prisoner." The words hit her like a blow. She blinked, unsure. If she had heard correctly, what? "You were in an escape pod," he said. "Your ship was destroyed. My crew picked up your signal. If we hadn't found you first, someone else would have, and I can promise you they wouldn't have been as gentle." She shook her head. "No, that can't be true. I saw the humans on my ship." "I saw boarding action," he interrupted. "We thought your ship was hostile. It wasn't until I saw you that I realized you weren't part of the fight. You were just caught in the middle." Her mind raced. The memories of that day were a blur of alarms, shouting, and fear. Could it be possible that everything she believed about her capture was wrong? He stepped closer, his voice lower now. "If I had left you there, you would be dead, or worse. That's why you're here. Not as a trophy, not as a captive. You're here because I made sure no one else could get to you." She stared at him, her thoughts colliding. Every act of kindness, every meal, every moment he had stood between her and danger, it all looked different now. "Why didn't you tell me?" she asked. "Would you have believed me?" He replied without hesitation. "When I first brought you here, you looked at me like I was a monster. No words would have changed that. I decided to show you instead." Her throat tightened, she remembered. The first night in this room, the untouched plate of food, the way she had glared at him like he was about to hurt her. And now, here he was, the same man. But no longer the same in her eyes. She wanted to speak, but her voice wouldn't come. He glanced toward the door. "You're free to leave if you want. The next station is 3 days away. I can arrange for you to be dropped off safely." The words landed like a stone in her chest. She had imagined escape so many times, dreamed of being free from this ship, but now the idea felt wrong. "You're letting me go?" She asked quietly. "Yes," he said, "if that's what you want." She looked down at her hands. Should have felt relief, but all she felt was an ache she couldn't explain. "What if I don't?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. He studied her for a long moment. And though his expression didn't change, there was something in his eyes, something softer, something almost like hope. "Then you stay," he said simply. Silence filled the room, heavy, but not hostile. She realized she had a choice now, not one forced by chains or fear, but one given freely. And that choice was harder than she could have imagined when he left. Locking the door out of habit, she sat on the bed for a long time, staring at the untouched food. She was no longer sure what she wanted, but one thing she knew for certain: the human captain was not the monster. She had been taught to fear, and that truth was more dangerous to her heart than any weapon. The next 3 days passed slowly. The ship kept its steady course toward the nearest station, and every hour that went by felt like a countdown. The alien girl knew what it meant when they arrived. She could walk away, back into a galaxy that was familiar to her. No human walls, no locked doors, no strange meals brought by a captain who watched her without cruelty. And yet, every time she pictured stepping off the ship, her chest tightened. The captain didn't visit her as often. Now, when he did, it was short. He would bring food, check the room, and leave. No questions, no orders, no lectures. It was as if he had already accepted that she might be gone soon. On the second night, she lay awake, staring at the ceiling. Thought of the first time she had seen him, the way she had prepared for pain, for humiliation. She thought of the attacks, the moments he had placed himself between her and danger, the way he had looked at her when he told her she was never his prisoner. The morning of the third day came with a soft knock. The door opened, and the captain stepped inside. He wasn't wearing armor this time, just the plain black uniform of his crew. "We'll reach the station in a few hours," he said. "I've arranged for you to disembark quietly. No questions from anyone. You'll be free to go wherever you want." Her hands tightened on the edge of the bed. And then what? Gaze didn't waver. "Then our paths end." The words landed heavier than she expected. She thought of asking him if that's what he wanted, but the answer was already in his eyes. He wasn't forcing her to go, but he wasn't going to stop her either. When he turned to leave, she spoke. "What happens if I stay?" "Wait." He paused. "In the doorway, if you stay, you'll have to follow my rules. You'll work like the crew." "No special treatment. That's it?" she asked. "That's it," he said. "You'd be safe. But it's your choice." The door closed behind him, leaving her alone with the decision. She thought about safety. She thought about freedom. She thought about the fact that those words weren't the same thing anymore. Hours later, the ship's voice announced their arrival. The engines slowed, the hum changing to a deep vibration. Through the small window in her room, she could see the station, a massive ring of metal turning slowly in the darkness, lights flickering along its edges. The door opened once more. The captain stood there, waiting. "It's time," he said. She rose from the bed, her steps slow as she crossed the room. He stepped aside, letting her into the hallway. Together, they walked in silence toward the docking bay. Crew members moved out of their way, some watching with quiet curiosity, others pretending not to notice. The air near the bay was colder, carrying the faint smell of fuel and metal. At the end of the corridor, the open hatch showed the stations. Docking tunnel. It's one step forward, and she would be free. She stopped just before the threshold. He stopped too, turning to face her. "This is where you go," he said. His voice was even, but she could see the faint tension in his jaw. She looked past him at the station, then back at him. "If I leave, I don't come back, do I?" His silence was the answer. Her heart pounded, and she realized she already knew what she was going to do. She took a step, not toward the hatch, but toward him. "I'm staying," she said. For the first time since she had met him, the smallest hint of a smile touched his face. It wasn't victory, and it wasn't relief exactly, it was something deeper. "Then we start fresh," he said. She nodded. "Then give me something to do." He gestured for her to follow him away from the hatch. As they walked back through the ship, she felt a strange lightness in her chest. She wasn't a prisoner anymore, and she wasn't just a guest. She had made her choice, and it was hers alone. When they reached the command deck, he showed her where she would work. It wasn't glamorous running systems checks, carrying messages, but it felt real. It felt like a place she belonged. That night, she stood in her room, looking out the small window at the station, fading into the distance. She thought about what could have happened if she had stepped into that tunnel. She thought about the dangers she still might face here. But when she thought about the captain, the man who had captured her, protected her, and given her a choice, she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. She felt safe. And that, she realized, was worth more than freedom without him.